Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of To The Point. I'm Kriti Mishra. And on today's show, I have with me Chief Executive Officer of Vaccine Major, Serum Institute of India, Mr. Adar Poonawalla. Mr. Poonawalla, welcome to Rajya Sabha Television and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Your institute has partnered with the Oxford Vaccine Project as one of the 7 global institutions behind manufacturing the vaccine for COVID-19. What is the progress and the timelines that you're looking at?
Well, we partnered with a bunch of different institutions and companies across the globe to manufacture this vaccine and have rights on where we can distribute and sell this vaccine. But to your question, the Oxford partnership is a little more exciting and has got a lot of traction lately because this is the vaccine which has gone already into human trials in the UK. And we're one of their major partners, but the only ones from India to manufacture this product if and when it succeeds through clinical trials. And I must clarify this because a lot of people have been asking for the vaccine, because I made a statement that we will produce it at personal cost and risk. And of course, I'm sure the government will support that financially to stockpile the product, so that when the trials succeed, and we hope they will by September, we will have enough vaccine for India and some other countries instead of waiting for another 6-7 months to then manufacture the vaccine. So this is to get a head start on it. And that's why it's all quite exciting. And, we hope to succeed in that.
But Adar, I'd like to understand that there are several risks associated with any vaccine. A lot of things have to go right for that on the clinical trials front, as you mentioned. But we'd like to understand what goes into developing a vaccine.
Well, there are many steps. First, you've got to characterize the virus and see that it's safe and efficacious. You've got to you've got to test it out in animals. You also have to make sure that the technology and what you use, the virus vector or a protein-based vaccine, or depending on what it is, will be easy to scale up in manufacturing. Because, a lot of these 100 different candidates that have announced they're working on a COVID vaccine, not all of them will be manufacturable. You won't be able to scale those up. So my question is that, even if they succeed, who's going to produce it? Putting up a new plant for 3 years is not, the answer. We need something that can go in right away in the existing platforms and manufacturing technologies. And then, of course, to your question, you have to go through human trials to see that it's first safe in a small group of individuals. Then you have to test the efficacy in a larger group of individuals where you vaccinate, let's say, and we're going to do this in India in the next 2-3 weeks as well, that hopefully we'll get the permission to do that, to establish the safety and then efficacy, where you, let's say, vaccinate a few hundred people in the high risk areas, and then you keep another group who's not vaccinated. And then you see whether the vaccinated group was substantially better off and did not get the disease compared to the other group. That's what goes into making the vaccine. And then, you get your regulatory nod to then produce it. And then, of course, that's a whole new other challenge, as I mentioned to you, about manufacturing.
All right. So let's go into detail. What kind of regulatory approvals or challenges you're looking at?
Well, normally for a new vaccine, it takes 5 to 6 years. But what Modi ji has done in the last 5-6 years has really reduced the committees and other requirements where, we had to jump through various different hoops and committees. And, you do one phase 1, then you do another one. And I'm sure now with the COVID crisis, all that is going to be streamlined further for new development of vaccines. And India is already a leader in that. And I think, I was always speaking up about how we could get more single window clearances. And COVID-19 is a great example, because if we can do it for COVID-19, which we have, and I'm told that I'll get the approval within days, without, shortcutting or corner cutting, it's just about having the right experts and committees ready to take a decision and give that decision quickly in a timely manner is all that we needed. We've got all the experts. We just have to do what we've done for COVID, for all other vaccines as well. And then there's nothing to stop us. We'll be churning out vaccines every year instead of every 5 years and take over the world, which we're already, leading the way in manufacturing, but also in new development of vaccines. Instead of being the last one to come about, we'll be the first. And that's what Modi ji has been trying to do, and we're going in that direction. And the regulatory approvals have been worked out quite well for COVID-19, where the DBT, the ICMR, the Drug Controller's Office, the Health Ministry, we're all working together, and we're all responding so well to each other that I have no doubt that the minute I import the virus down from the UK, we'll be able to get into trials, within weeks.
We understand that all the stakeholders are working in tandem for developing this vaccine, but taking a cue from what you said, that typically vaccines take many years. How have you fast-tracked this process?
Well, as I said, because we have stopped pretty much, looking at everything else, and we're focusing only on this. So it's been prioritized. You've got your health experts and committees who will immediately look at the proposal that we've put, and they'll clear it. Typically that would take months to clear. Then you'd have to submit more data. Then again, you'd have to go back to the experts. So all that is becoming, and has become rather, into a single window process, which is what the industry has been asking for a long time. And it's a great example. There are a lot of positives that are going to come out of this. We don't need to look at only the doom and gloom. From the regulatory policies, people coming together, the connections that people have made in this crisis have been phenomenal. And so I think that's going to bring India back with a bang, and in a much stronger and better way, from all angles, from the regulatory angle and so many other areas.
Right, point well taken. But we're talking about mammoth production. And the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns have taken a toll on manufacturing capacity worldwide. How do you plan to expand existing facilities for manufacturing, or maybe create the new ones?
Well, we've already initiated a 600 crore state-of-the-art multi-product COVID vaccine manufacturing facility. But of course, that's going to take 2 years at our existing campus to build, maybe 2.5 years. In the meanwhile, what we hope to do is that substitute some of the existing vaccines that we have, and juggle around a bit with that to produce 40-50 million doses in the short term, till we can dedicate a full facility to it. And maybe we may shut down 1 or 2 of our existing other vaccines, where some of the other suppliers could make those vaccines, and we go ahead and use the bulk of our facilities to make COVID-19. That decision hasn't fully been taken. I've committed at least 40-50 million doses by the end of this year, which we'll try to do, and sacrifice a lot of other opportunity costs for other vaccines. But going forward, we'll have to have a dedicated facility, to which I'm talking to the government and other philanthropic organizations for support, and building something that I can announce maybe in 2-3 months' time, and let you know about what we're planning to do there.
Absolutely. Right now, COVID-19 has assumed paramount importance, and rest everything can wait, and we'll have massive opportunity cost also. But talking about the BCG trials, now studies have also shown that the BCG vaccine has the ability to improve the body's immune system. So what is the status on recombinant BCG vaccine against COVID-19?
Right. I'll just give you a little background on that. As you may or may not be aware, we've been making BCG vaccine for more than 20 years. India has been, through its government institutes, been consuming this vaccines for more than 30 years, I think. You'll have to check that out, but a very, very long time. It is a very safe product and vaccine because it goes into newborn babies. So, of course, the safety is, paramount and is at the highest. Very mild vaccine that way. We are making also a recombinant BCG vaccine, which will enter into trials within 2 weeks from today in India, because that is the new and improved version of BCG, which will give better protection to your innate immunity. Now, what is innate immunity? It is your body's ability to fight off other infections and generally boost your immunity against all viruses, bacteria, including COVID-19. And why the health experts thought that this could be interesting, in fact, it didn't even occur to us as a manufacturer, is that the data came out, and you must have seen this, that out of, I think, 30 or 40 countries where they looked at whether BCG was in their immunization campaigns and was taken for the last 20, 30 years or not, those countries have seen about 6 to 7 times less severity in COVID-19 cases, indicating that there could be a link that BCG vaccine is giving you that immunity booster. And of course, look, we can't compare ourselves to Europe and US. We can compare ourselves to the Asians. Our immunity, our diet, our climate will result in different cases and the severity of cases coming out. So we can't directly compare ourselves to Europe and US. But this was a strong and major factor, which could be an additional factor and advantage in fighting against COVID. Of course, in no way it's a replacement to getting a COVID vaccine and other drugs, but this is definitely going to give a general immunity. And look, this is a very, very inexpensive vaccine, very cheap vaccine. So, it's 10, 20 rupees a dose. So compared to other vaccines, which generally go into hundreds or thousands of rupees per dose. So this is something which is a very easy thing to do and scale up because we're already doing it. It's an established product. It's safe. Now we just need to finish the clinical trials to prove without doubt that, yes, there is a difference. And so we're designing a trial and study to give it to the immunocompromised or at-risk healthcare workers and others to see कि ये लोग में immunity improve होता है कि नहीं.
Right. Okay. So there's also a counter narrative, Adar, and I'd like to elicit your views on that. What is your view on herd immunity? Something like we're witnessing in Sweden. What is your take?
This is not a counter. In fact, it is in line with exactly what we've been talking about and what I've been propagating is that you look at all diseases, H1N1, measles, everything that came about recently and what has come about in the past. How has humanity overcome all this? First, you build herd immunity because nobody can produce a vaccine and drug immediately for a new novel virus. You see how long it's going to take even for this, even with today's technology, forget what was available in the past. So first, the argument is you build herd immunity, get immunized and exposed. Your healthy people in a population get exposed. That reduces then the transmission because you've got that immunity. And combine that further with a vaccine which comes about 1 or 2 years or 3 years later, you get to a level of 70, 80% herd immunity, hopefully, in a matter of a few years. And that's how you deal with the disease and overcome it. And that's how, and when you have to keep, then you can let the elderly and immunocompromised come out and, social distancing can reduce and all that. But till then, that has to continue. We build our herd immunity. We unleash the healthy workforce. Don't quarantine the healthy. That's what I've been saying. Quarantine the unhealthy. Keep the elderly and immunocompromised and the positive COVID-19 subjects under quarantine. Keep them away from everyone else. But unleash the healthy, youthful, young India to get back to work and restart the economy. Because look, you can extend a lockdown, you can have repeated lockdowns, you can have another lockdown later. Lockdowns are not the answer. The initial lockdown that Modi ji did was very timely, very necessary, and it definitely flattened the curve, reduced the cases compared to other countries like Sweden you mentioned that didn't have a lockdown, United States that didn't have a lockdown. They will definitely have more cases. But look, you are actually only delaying the inevitable. Right, where the population does need to get exposed to this virus eventually over time and build herd immunity. But why was the lockdown still necessary? Because the health systems, the hospitals today, your quarantine areas, the testing was not ready to handle so much. And with our population, this was the right thing to do. But now, after 2-3 weeks, as an extension which we've been hearing is coming, we should not further extend any more lockdowns because then you're going to really destroy people's livelihoods. And this is the way even the medical community has advised everyone, not just in India, to come over this virus like humanity has overcome all other viruses.
But Mr. Poonawalla, the argument remains the same in that case as well. How do we strike a balance between lives and livelihoods?
I'll tell you. No one can answer that because every life is precious. Even one life lost is you can't quantify that. If it happened to one of our loved ones, God forbid, we would say, "Arey, I wish we would have just permanently stayed in a state of lockdown. Gosh, ye mar nahi jata." But if you look at you have to look at it in perspective. Let's take the example of the United States, which has more or less not had a full lockdown.
Yeah.
Do we agree on that?
Agreed.
Okay. So let's see what's happened there. 40 to 50,000 people, and this is official statistics, you can have it verified. 40 to 50,000 people every year in the United States die of influenza and flu. Now, so far, 25,000 odd people, I believe, have passed away because of COVID-19. If you look at it as a percentage, even of flu, or let's say it's comparable to flu, right? Some people say it's worse, but let's say it's the same or even a little bit worse. A few thousand deaths in a population of hundreds of millions. What is the population of the United States? Few hundred million. So you have to see if it's statistically relevant, A, and B, according to your death rate, is it really that significant? Now take India, for example. You have a population of 1.4 billion. Every year, I believe about 8.5 million people die of natural causes, other diseases, vagera, vagera. Now, if we end up having 800,000 deaths or some obnoxious figure like that, that would amount to a 10% increase of the annual death rate, but still a very small percentage of the overall population. So one has to balance that and see it in perspective. Of course, when you say a few thousand deaths or 100,000 deaths, it sounds huge.
Yeah.
But what is it in proportion to your population? Now, having said that, we have to also balance the injustice. The injustice today, what is happening, I don't know if you've checked and you must be reporting this, that people are being refused and there are a lot of deaths for the other reason. What is that reason? You can't go to hospital for cancer treatment, other ailments, cardio attacks and other things because hospitals are saying, unless you have a COVID related thing, we are turning you away.
Right.
Now, how can we continue like this? Can you imagine how many deaths due to pneumonia and other things and so many other things will happen if we only look at COVID in isolation? You have to take a balanced view. So those deaths may turn out to be more. So I'm not arguing that, a few thousand deaths is okay because, overall in our population, it's not significant. That's one point, but you're not looking at the other point. You see, continuous lockdowns will result in mental deterioration. Look at the child abuse, the spousal abuse, alcoholism, other healthcare neglects that are going to come out of a prolonged lockdown or this kind of destruction of livelihoods. You see, we will get over the disease. You can recover from disease, but the long-term effects of COVID in these other areas we need to address. Imagine losing a livelihood. The man is going to get abusive. He's going to get mad. He may take it out on his children, his wife, I don't know, whatever, or commit suicide, God knows what. So those effects, according to me, are far worse than what we're seeing in terms of the deaths coming out with directly COVID-related issues. So someone needs to balance that out and understand that, and then we can decide the next steps.
That's a very legit point that you're making. And moving on, I'd like to ask you, how are you planning to ramp up the production of COVID-19 testing kits?
Well, as you know, we have made an investment in My Labs and a partnership with My Labs, which will produce 2 million kits per week. But there's a rider to this, because unless we have the private labs who are ready with the infrastructure and the PCR machines and the labs to be able to handle those kits, we have today more supply than demand, which is, what my intention of this investment was, that we ramp up the testing, but unless we remove the red tape for the private labs, which is happening to a large extent, I can't deny that. But till that happens, to answer your question, the testing will not be able to go up. And look, a lot of employers will insist on testing to happen, and that's the right procedure that the government will probably lay out, that when we open up the economy, what are going to be the next steps? You test first, and then you come to work. Anyone showing symptoms should stay at home, be quarantined, but please do not have a draconian system where you shut down the company because you find 1 or 2 cases coming up. You quarantine those people. Let the healthy people continue to work. And that is possible only with more testing kits, what we have done with My Labs. And I'm sure as the private labs and government labs also scale up, you'll see within a month, I hope, the shortage and mismatch will go away. In fact, we'll have more of a supply of testing kits than the demand.
Absolutely. And I'll just quickly get your perspective on this, that global innovation is the need of the hour to curb this coronavirus pandemic that has affected millions across the globe. Do you think that this will also spark deep tech innovation?
Absolutely. You're going to see a lot of investment coming in, not only for innovation, but also manufacturing from the US and other places, because who's going to want to go to China after this? Everyone's realized that they want to reduce their dependence on China. And Modi ji is going to put out, if he's not already done that, a red carpet for all the foreigners and domestic players to invest more in innovation and technology in India. And you're going to see, the economy coming back with a big swing. That's my prediction. As soon as we open up and, the fear psychosis reduces and we see that, look, there will be millions of cases, but very few deaths. That's what's coming out with all the statistical data abroad and everywhere else. So we need to understand that there will be cases, but low deaths. And that's the silver lining here. And that will bring about a lot of innovation and investment, both from the domestic side and from the foreign side, after this is opened up and
Yes, and the way ahead. Mr. Poonawalla, lastly, India has co-sponsored a UN General Assembly resolution that has called for a fair, transparent and equitable access and to essential medical supplies for COVID-19 across the globe. How difficult is it to ensure equitable access to as many as possible?
I think that's a question for Modi ji. He, I'm sure, will balance this out. And I think we always have to look at our country first. And if you have developed something in India, then you have to give priority to your nation first, and then we can look outward to help. And we, as a nation, have always stepped up to the challenge and helped. Even from the vaccine side, there were global shortages in vaccines. And as soon as we fulfilled our commitments in India, we stepped up and always helped out other nations. And I'm sure that will continue both in vaccines and in drugs. But we have to take a balanced view. We also have a lot of inequality. We have a huge population here. And we have to look at our country first and then other countries. So that's the way we have to balance it out. And I'm sure we will.
And your stance on patents, that remains the same?
Well, in the general order of things, I've always disagreed with not having patents, but having these long patents of 20 and 30 years.
Yeah.
Look, if you've innovated, of course, you should be rewarded for it. Have a 6-7 year patent. And if you've done something so great and innovative, it should not be so easy, technically speaking, for someone else to copy you. So unless it's a fraud patent where you've just, done something to keep other people away, what are you so afraid of? So my point is that have a 5-6 year patent, recoup your investment and have that head start over others and be rewarded for it, but don't have a 30-year patent. Now coming to the COVID-19 point,
yes,
on having a patent on COVID, that was my general thinking on patents overall. But on COVID, we certainly, for the technologies and rights that we're going to have, of course, this is outside of the Oxford part because that's Oxford's IP, but
yes,
for the other technologies that we're co-developing and having the IP rights for the other vaccine candidates, we will not restrict others from manufacturing it. We may have a patent, we may not have a patent, but we will not play dog in the manger and not allow others to manufacture a product because, you can always agree on some royalty basis and commercial agreements and arrangements, but we should not deprive the world in a crisis like this from having multiple manufacturers, that will have to rise to the occasion, invest and produce the vaccines that come about, because no single manufacturer can and should have the awesome responsibility of having that power of controlling manufacturing for such a pandemic and such a public health crisis.
Absolutely. That's a very important point that you're making, that no single manufacturer can or should have this sole responsibility. But Mr. Poonawalla, all the very best for your endeavors. The world is looking forward to a vaccine for COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much for joining Rajya Sabha Television.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.